Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Brett West, and this is Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. Before we get started with the festivities, and we're going to talk Georgia Championship Wrestling from Florida. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about Eddie Mansfield, an interview I, to be honest with you, I thought he had passed away. I thought he was. Because I'd read stuff that he did. Jack let me know he's very much alive.
Well, in my case, I thought he was dead a long time ago.
I was thinking because people were, everybody had said he had passed on. I thought maybe after Jack told me he was alive, I thought, well, okay, maybe, just maybe they were just talking about his career in wrestling. So maybe that was what the problem was. But we want to tell everybody a couple of things. We want to thank eMeet. They are going to be a huge part of our live show, Pro Wrestling Inside and Out, having a live show, Championship Wrestling, Saturday, April 6th, Huntsville, Alabama, at the Live Wire Arena. And eMeet's going to be a big part of that. They're partnering with us, and we'll be recording and also doing a video to let the people know how you use the eMeet. So we want to thank them so much for partnering up with us and being a part of our first ever Pro Wrestling Inside and Out live event. Going to be exciting. I think people will enjoy it. Something else we want to talk about while we're here as well is I think that professional wrestling at this point, and we have to talk about this real quickly. WWE ratings up, AEW ratings down. I don't think that. I think that's been a common thread. Rodney, I'm going to let you talk about that while I'm pulling everything up here.
Well, Daniel Bryanson, one of the most brilliant and gifted wrestlers of our day, says that if the people will tune in if you have excellent pro wrestling. Daniel, if you don't mind, let us know when you have that, and we'll tune in. Just let you know that. Just as soon as you have excellent pro wrestling over there, let everybody know, because as of yet we don't. I just wonder, hey Wardblow, how you doing there, Mister? Huh? You choked out, didn't you, buddy? They choked you out right on national television. You had to tap there, didn't you, huh?
Hey, let me ask you a question.
That's a career embellishment right there.
Jack, let me ask you this question. WWE has not just set the world on fire as well on the ratings. No really changes with The Rock, except for maybe a couple of 100,000 people. I read a thing that said they're doing the same thing they had done 20 years ago with The Rock. Is that true? Because all I've seen is little snippets of what The Rock does.
Well, if you've ever watched his movies, and I love to watch his movies, but he's basically the same character in every movie. He's The Rock, reading different lines and going by a different name. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a ton of actors that have made become multimillionaires, billionaires out of it. But with wrestling, it's I guess a cross we have to bear is that people want to they remember you from the past and they want you to come back, but when you're the same character you were, they want you to be something different. So it's hard to please wrestling fans. I mean, let's just be honest. But that should be our objective at the end of the day. But yeah, I see exactly what they're talking about. They need to do some other things as far as the language, the sing along with the Rock. Honestly, all that stuff was done, years ago. So they need to do some kind of different edge to him. Now I like the build that they're doing, but obviously it's not doing tremendously bigger numbers for them. And I think there's still a lot of uncertainty as to, with fans as to where WWE is headed for sure.
Very interesting things going on. But right now, let's talk about championship wrestling from Florida. And we're going to talk Tuesday, January 8th, 1980. The Fort Homer Hesterly Armory in Tampa, Florida. Rip Oliver defeated Don Sereno. I think that's how you would say that name.
Mm-hmm.
Gordon Nelson defeated Luis Astella. I believe that may be how you say that name. Johnny Valiant defeated Mike Miller. Jerry Briscoe and Don Diamond defeated the Blonde Bombers, Brian St. John, and Stan Lane. The Super Destroyer defeated Gordon Nelson. NWA Florida television title match, Mike Brown defeated Bugsy McGraw. The television title was only on the line for the first 15 minutes. And your main event, Dusty Rhodes and Manny Fernandez defeated Ernie Ladd and Leroy Brown. Jack?
Tuesday, January the 15th, 1980, at the Fort Homer Hesterly Armory in Tampa, Florida. Don Sereno versus Luis Astia ended without a winner as a time limit draw. Nikolai Volkov defeated Gordon Nelson. Stan Lane, Brian St. John, and Nikolai Volkov defeated Jack Briscoe, Jerry Briscoe, and Don Diamond. In a lumberjack match, Mike Graham defeated Bugsy McGraw. For the NWA heavyweight title, Manny Fernandez defeated Leroy Brown. And Uvalde Slim, haven't heard that name in a while, defeated the Super Destroyer.
Uvalde Slim could have been a many different people, but I think at this point it was Dusty Rhodes. Later, Jack Briscoe is also dons the mask as Uvalde Slim. All right, Rodney.
All right, we come up on Saturday, January the 5th, 1980, the WTBS studios in Atlanta, Georgia. It's the electrifying Kevin Sullivan defeated Coco Ware. Lars Anderson versus Buck Starr. Toro Tanaka and Killer Khan defeats Chick Donovan and Gino Rizzelli for the Georgia Television Championship. Steve Travis defeated Austin Idol to become the new Georgia Television Champion. Mass Superstar defeated Tom Vito. Eddie Mansfield defeats Chick Donovan. Ivan Koloff and Alexis Smirnoff defeat Gerald Finley and Coco Ware. Tony Atlas and Ray Candy defeats Bob Garrett and Jack Poor. And it's Mr. Wrestling 2 defeating Dr. X.
If you kind of wonder why I decided to go with Eddie Mansfield, because his name came up here for Georgia Championship Wrestling. And while I was doing research for it, I found some very interesting things that he said within the interview. And I thought, hey, this could work together. All right, Jack, a very special story about Andre the Giant. I didn't know this, but it's very interesting about Andre.
Doctors use Andre the Giant's legendary booze intake to determine how much anesthesia to give him for surgery. As with everything involving the gargantuan Frenchman, the myth is indistinguishable from the reality. But the legend of Andre the Giant's drinking almost overshadows his wrestling triumphs. There are numerous stories of his drinking feats, 119 to 156 beers in one setting, a case of wine on a 4-hour bus ride, a $40,000 bar tab while filming The Princess Bride, an average of 7,000 calories of alcohol intake a day, or as Ric Flair says, amateur. When Vince McMahon asked Andre to come back to the WWF as a villain in 1987 to feud with Hulk Hogan and to headline WrestleMania 3, Andre said that his back was too hurt for him to wrestle. McMahon was determined, though, so he paid for Andre to have surgery and let him rehab at the McMahon family home. Legacy has it that the anesthesiologist responsible for putting Andre under had never before had a giant for a patient, had no idea how much anesthesia to give him. He ended up asking how much booze he normally drank and used that as a guide for his dosage. It usually takes 2 liters of vodka just to make me feel warm inside, Andre quipped.
I did not know. I know Andre had a back surgery during this point in time, but I did not realize and understand that Vince McMahon paid for that.
Yeah, and I'm sure Linda was unaware of the staying at her house.
Maybe she went to Florida during that point.
Yeah.
She's ended up there many times. All right. On October 1952, Yukon Eric, a beloved mountain man, was fighting the notorious Waldo Kowalski. Is that how you say his name? Is it Waldo? Waldeck Kowalski? Is that how you say
Yeah,
his name?
just go for it. Waldeck.
All right. All right. In front of an electric Montreal crowd, the two rivals were deep into the match, and Kowalski climbed the ropes to deliver his signature knee drop. He landed on the side of Eric's head, accidentally clipped one of Eric's cauliflowered ears, the grotesque, bloated, and hard ears wrestlers were famous for, and accidentally tore it off the side of his head. Woo! But that was a sight. The fans went nuts, and when the papers the next day confirmed the bawling, outrage grew to a fever pitch. The promoter feared for Kowalski's personal safety, lest some livid fan decide to exact some justice. So it was suggested that Kowalski visit Eric in the hospital to give the appearance of feeling bad about his ear. Kowalski agreed. He and Eric were friends in real life. After all, there was a I'm going to try to say that in a minute. There was a reporter from the local paper there covering the plight of Eric. And when Kowalski got into the hospital room, the sight of the foe and his ridiculous full head bandage made him laugh. I swear, the first thing I thought of was Humpty Dumpty on the wall, Kowalski later said. Eric laughed right along, but when the reporter heard the laughter from the hall, he had only heard Kowalski's booming voice. And the headline the next day said that Kowalski showed up only to laugh in Eric's face. It only confirmed the fans' revulsion toward the villain. Suddenly, Kowalski had a new nickname, Killer. Real injuries sell tickets, though, and after that, Eric and Kowalski were drawing giant crowds all over the country. Well, that was a very interesting story. Very interesting story indeed. All right, let's now talk about Georgia Championship Wrestling. Rodney, I would think 1980. Your opinions of 1980 Georgia Championship Wrestling, and more specifically, January 1980.
This was transition period for sure. With this is pretty much the end of the let's just say Ole Anderson headline in the cards, and then we start by the end of '80 we start moving towards the Freebirds, and a whole new array of talent starts heading in there. A lot of rehash. Certainly, but we did have some great things on top of it. The Terry Funk, Dusty Rhodes feud was one of them. But yeah, it was definitely a transitional period for Georgia for sure.
Well, we already heard a little bit about some of the. This was the WTBS studio in Atlanta, Georgia, on January 12th, 1980. Killer Khan was there. He defeated Gerald Finley. Lars Anderson defeated Aaron Holt. Kevin Sullivan, Rodney's favorite. But, at this point, he wasn't as bad as he would become. Defeated Sammy Hall. NWA Georgia television title match. Austin Idol wins the belt back from Steve Travis in a title change. Tommy Rich and Wally McDaniel defeated Bobby Garrett and Aaron Holt. Ivan Koloff and Alexis Smirnoff defeated Marvin Turner and Chick Donovan. The Masked Superstar defeated Sammy Hall. It would be around this time that they would have Masked Superstar and Wrestling 2 would go for their second, maybe their third time. Maybe the second time. Was it the second time, Rodney?
Second time around. This second time around is when they had the fake Wrestling 2. That's what this time around comes.
Louis Tilley was booking during this time period. Am I correct about that?
That is correct.
Louis Tilley was booking at this point in time in Georgia Championship Wrestling. It was not the greatest time. Business was not great during this point in time. They would have a couple of them. The Omni was doing okay. It was still hitting some 7,000 to 12,000 seats being sold, but other places wasn't doing so well. Rome, Georgia was only doing good because is this before or after Ivan and Alexis Smirnoff went against Tony Atlas and Kevin Sullivan?
This was after, because we've got Lars and Ole going against them now. Wait a minute.
Tony Atlas, Kevin Sullivan against.
I'm sorry. I think that was before, because Ole leaves and he goes up
Yes.
to Knoxville, and so during that time is when Tony and Sullivan was working against Koloff and Smirnoff. Tremendous matches.
We'll talk more about Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Those matches, though.
We'll talk more about Georgia Championship Wrestling and
That
this
comes later
time
with Mark Lewin. It's in the same year. It's brilliant.
Oh yes, yeah. Wait till we get to that, and we talk about the Mark Lewin time frame. Was not a good time for Georgia Championship Wrestling. Business was really down. We'll talk more about Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Let's just be honest, but Sullivan was having a ball in every match. It's always good to have fun when you're wrestling. You know what I'm saying?
We're going to transition. After that, we're going to transition to Eddie Mansfield for a minute. And the reason I want to talk about Eddie Mansfield, because he was in this time frame that we're talking about right now in 1980. I looked at some stuff. Eddie Mansfield started in 1977 and was working for Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling. Ogle, a guy named Ogle, he's the one that trained him. In 1977, he goes to work for Bob Geigel. He goes to Texas. He goes to California. And then he ends up with the Fullers in 1978. I want to read this, because we all know of the 2020, of what happened on 2020. Eddie Mansfield talking about professional wrestling and what he said about professional wrestling, and another thing, David Schultz slapping John Stossel. It all happened in this one program. I got to ask Jack this question.
It was balanced.
John Stossel wasn't.
Here's the question I want to ask about this. Did David Schultz slapping John Stossel just kind of put a glaze over Eddie Mansfield of what he even said about wrestling?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because I never remember. I thought it was two different interviews. I didn't realize it was the same show.
2020 only did that because wrestling was at a height at that point in time. Almost every territory, every wrestling company was drawing. WWF had just Hulkamania had just run wild, so to speak, and I think they wanted to, in some form or fashion, they wanted to kind of live off of that. And it was ABC that did it. Had they done any of the Saturday Night's Main Event yet? I don't think that.
No, Saturday Night Main Event was on NBC. ABC was the competition.
But I mean, at that time, though, huge ratings when they finally got there. I think Andre the Giant against Hulk Hogan on NBC, that Friday night show, I think it was. I think 30-something million people watched that. 30 million homes tuned in to watch Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant.
Could you say that one more time for Triple H?
30 million people tuned in to watch that.
Right.
And I think in a large part, and I'll ask you, Andre the Giant, I think, more than Hulk Hogan. What do you think, Jack?
I agree with that. Andre had already at this point been built into a almost mythical type character. His career had been handled very well by Vince. So, and this was unique. It's the first time a network had carried professional wrestling since the 50s. So it was huge.
Rodney, do you think that when you look at that time frame, 1984, I mean, Hulk Hogan had just sometime in that that time he had won the WWF Heavyweight Championship. WWF was, I think they had just come off of WrestleMania 1. Wasn't WrestleMania 1 in 1984? I think it was.
I believe so.
Or was it 1985?
First one would be in 80. Was it 82? I know it was 83 when the Vince took over TBS, right?
Well, 1980. Well, you look at that, 1987. I think it would have been 1985 because I think WrestleMania would have been WrestleMania 1 would have been 1985, WrestleMania 2, 1986, WrestleMania 3, 1987.
Okay.
Because didn't we did something that said Andre came back in 87. Less WrestleMania 3 was 1988. Let's talk about
the first WrestleMania. I know that they were advertising it when WWE or WWF had control of TBS because Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff was was his name Tommy that helped put up the ring. They had him on there, very disgusting display.
Yes.
I believe that was. I think that was the same time, for sure. Now, was this the Andre Hogan match? You're talking about the one with the two lookalike referees, right?
Yes.
It was a tremendous show, absolutely tremendous show, and that was where the belt was held up, and then they went to WrestleMania 4 at in Atlantic City, Trump Casino, for the tournament where Randy Savage won, right?
Yeah, at some point they had WrestleMania 1, 2, and 3. We know they had that. All right, let me ask you this question. Eddie Mansfield was not the first person in the history of professional wrestling to ever out professional wrestling. Correct?
That is
Correct.
correct.
We had promoters doing it in the 1960s.
Well, we also had it in the 1920s.
Yeah. So it wasn't the first. He wasn't the first. He was just the latest in 1980 to do it. Here's an interview that and I want to take this a little bit at a time, and we'll talk about it. He says he broke into wrestling at age 19, and he asked if there was anybody that influenced him, and he said Terry Funk. He said that was the one person that he knew. Leon Ogle was the guy that broke him into wrestling. Rodney, do you remember him? Because he says he was part of the Georgia promotion. I'm not for sure I remember.
I don't remember him. No, I don't remember him.
I mean, he could have been in the 60s. But he also talks about, he says that I came into the business and got a really good push right at the beginning. When I look at this, I don't see that he got a push until about April of 1978. So I don't think he got it right at the beginning, because if you look at his matches and you look at the breakdown of his matches, Gulf Coast Wrestling 1977, he's in the first matches. Geigel, when he goes to work for Geigel, he's in the first matches. Texas, he's in the first matches. California, he's in the first couple of matches. Now he may have he might have got to the main event because somebody didn't show up, but I didn't see it. It could have happened, but I didn't see it. Based on what you know, Jack, did he start out in a push right from the beginning?
I don't remember him ever being a guy who was ever a majorly pushed guy at all.
Rodney?
No, I never. I was in a place that he was on the main event. Tremendous potential, though.
Yeah,
had a tremendous potential. All he needed was a push. But as far as any place that I been or saw that he never saw the main event, he normally followed the national anthem.
Now we're going to get to there because there is a time that he gets a push. And we'll talk about that because of April of 1978 he does. This is what he said. He said, I was living with Ron Fuller and shared a 3-bedroom condo in Pensacola. We got a call at the house from Leo Garibaldi from Los Angeles. This was 1978. So I had to board a plane from Pensacola to Los Angeles. He says that he ends up in the main event that particular night against Mil Mascaras. He said that Moondog Mayne had passed away, and he took his spot that night. They probably called him Moondog Mayne that night. Knowing promoters. April 1978, though, he does go, and Chavo Guerrero really loved him there, and he does start getting a push. So much so that he has a program with Scott Casey, and he loses his hair there. And he's there for over a year. But he leaves there to go back to work for Ron Fuller. Did he just run his course, Jack?
Well, I remember.
Or did Ron Fuller call him? What he says is Ron Fuller called him and told him he asked him to come back.
There's some truth to that. I think Ron had give him an open door, but that hair match, I remember an interview he did where he said that the promoter had promised him a hefty payoff for doing that and then reneged on it. He didn't even get his full regular pay.
Wow.
So he got mad and left.
He ends up going back to Ron Fuller. He works with David Schultz, and they become the tag team champions there. So he gets a push there, but by that time, that was right as he said in this interview, he talks about that Ron called him. He said, it's time. I need your help because Ron Garvin, Bob Roop, Bob Orton Jr. are trying to steal my territory. I need to bring you here and team with David Schultz and try to help him save his territory. Rodney, did Ron Fuller call him?
I would say, and I'm just guessing here, of course, I would say that Eddie was mad over the fantastic pay he got over in California, and he was looking a place to go. And he called Ron first, and Ron said, "Sure, come on in." And that's the way I figured it.
Well, now, honestly, if Ron called him, it was probably, "Hey, Eddie, I'm returning your call."
That is correct.
He says when he goes to leave, though, this is what he said when he goes to leave. He said he went to Mike LaBelle and said, "Can I take 60 days off?" Now, at this point, I'm on every match except for maybe the opener. He is a manager. He manages Leroy Brown and a bunch of other wrestlers. He said he told him, "You're not allowed to leave." That's exactly what he told him. He said, "What do you mean I'm not allowed to leave? You don't own me. If I can't leave for 60 days, I'll just give you my notice right now." That didn't set well with Mike LaBelle. LaBelle was a great guy, but not a great guy. When things went his way, he was good, but when they didn't, he wasn't. Well, I think that's most people, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I never forget when I was moving, I had an apartment that I rented from Joe Go from Go's Gym. It was on Muscle Beach in Santa Monica. The vans had arrived to move my furniture, and Leo Garibaldi had come to say to me, "Look, if you leave, I'm going to get fired." I said, "Leo, am I honest as can be? Number one, I'm worn out physically, and number two, I need to help out a friend of mine for 60 days, and I'll be back. You could just do an angle to hurt me, and I can come back." But they wouldn't stand for it. Leo said that they would pay my rent and pay for everything. Then I said, you'd pay for that now, but you didn't offer that before this. I was thinking, if I'm that important, why wasn't I offered that before? I don't know. Have y'all ever, and I'll just run to this first. Have you ever heard of a promoter there was a few. Jerry Jarrett did that to Jimmy Valiant. But many promoters didn't just beg you to stay, did they?
Nope, they did not.
Jack, anybody ever
No, they did not.
Tell you they's going to pay for your home and everything if you stayed?
No.
I mean, could have happened.
No, but now, as a booker promoter, in the past, I have had guys leave me that I asked them not to leave, or at least put it off a little while, because I was pushing them as a top guy. And I wouldn't want to try to stop them from going somewhere else. I just needed to be able to put some finality on what we were doing where I was at.
when Eddie Mansfield leaves and he goes to work for Ron, what I don't think he probably understood is Ron is in the process of selling the territory. It doesn't take too much longer before Ron sells the territory to Jim Barnett. I believe this is how Eddie Mansfield would get to Georgia, because he was already working for that. But let me tell you what he says in this deal. He says he leaves to go help a friend. He says, actually, I should have stayed. I really should have stayed, which he should have. He was getting pushed big time there, probably making some pretty good money.
Yeah.
On the main events, managing people, big dick. So he says that was one of the biggest mistakes I ever did in my wrestling career. I went to Knoxville, and Schultz went there to help them out. Fuller will screw you, and I won't say what he says, really good, and not give you any Vaseline. Well, if he knew that, I don't understand why he would go there. He says it's like Chavo would tell you, and his father would tell you, don't work for the Fullers, which Hector Guerrero does a few times. And I'm not the first guy to say that, but Ron Fuller helped me out when I was younger, and his brother Robert, and he says he was a piece of work. He doesn't leave. He goes to Knoxville, but the only reason he ends up in Atlanta, Rodney, and I'm pretty sure of this, is because they had bought the territory. It wasn't that they brought him in, so to speak, as he was just there from Ron Fuller's territory. Am I correct about this?
No. No, I do not believe that he was a commodity that was taken from Knoxville. I don't believe that, because when we went there, Schultz and Condrey were the team, and they were the team before that. Dick Slater was there. So no, I don't buy that at all. I think Eddie Mansfield was brought in, honestly, by Louis Tillett, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I believe Louis Tillett.
No, I don't believe this. This story has all the makings of total crap. Okay, a total garbage story. You're on top in California, but you're going to go work for somebody that's going to pay you mediocre bucks, and you're going to a dead territory in Knoxville, Tennessee. You mean you had the world in the palm of your hand, and you're going to leave there? That is the biggest load of garbage I've ever heard in my entire life. But then it was Eddie Mansfield.
Now, it is the truth. He drew good houses, big houses, from April of 1978 in California until he leaves in 1979. In May of 1979, he ends up with Ron Fuller. In November of 1979, he starts working for Georgia Championship Wrestling, not under, he talks about Ole, and we'll get to that in just a minute, but Ole Anderson was not even working there at the time, and I don't believe he was booking both territories at the time. Louis Tillett was the booker. November 1979, he was not working. Ole Anderson wasn't there, and I'm not for sure it was not during that time that Ole went to Minnesota and did his Christmas tree farm or whatever he owns down there, or up there, or wherever Minnesota's at. Louis Tillett brought him in because Louis Tillett was probably in Fuller's territory booking when Eddie Mansfield was there. I mean, wouldn't that make sense?
Yeah, that would make sense.
And I remember Louis Tillett was working at the time. He was working in because I think wasn't Dad was at this point. Dad was which was Ron West, for those people who don't know. He was actually in Knoxville, correct?
Right.
November 1979, when Louis Tillett was booking, he was taking care of Jim Barnett's interest of which I think, did Jim Barnett own that, or did Georgia Championship Wrestling Incorporated buy? Did they buy it, or did Jim Barnett buy it? I'm not for sure.
I believe it was Barnett by himself bought that.
I'm thinking it was too. Here's what he says when he gets to Georgia. He said that Wally McDaniel came to him and said, "You remind me of Ray Stevens, Ric Flair, and Dusty Rhodes all in one guy." I looked at him and said, "Wally, I really don't know how to take that. Is that a compliment or an insult?" All three of those guys were real characters. He told me he meant it in a good way. Well, I believe that is a true story because in May of 1979, he ends up going to Texas, and Wahoo McDaniel is booking. And evidently, I guess I kind of had that wrong because that was Texas where he went against Scott Casey for the deal. I guess he went against Chavo and the majority of the time in California. But he goes to Texas, and again, main event. They do put him on the main events, and he is in the main events in Texas. Do you remember that? Because I don't remember him being there. But would we have even watched 1979? Would we even have watched Texas wrestling from Texas?
I am unaware of anything that you said, and I'm going to just go out on a limb here. Nobody in Texas remembers it either.
Well, now that is where he has the deal with Scott Casey, not California. Chavo Guerrero.
You're talking about working for Blanchard, San Antonio.
Yes. He works for Blanchard, and for some reason, though, he goes in May, and by the end of October, he goes back to Atlanta, and he says he works for Ole.
He does come back for a while because they're in the new studio when he comes in, and I've just recently saw some studio matches with him in it. This was, I believe, when they had the Georgia Junior title.
But he does go work for Texas. He does draw some good houses. He comes back to Atlanta while Ole's working. This is what he said in his interview. He said at that point, Ole was booking Atlanta. Well, Ole would probably had just came back to Atlanta at that point in time because it was sometime in July that he turned on Dusty, wasn't it? Of 1980. He says that he drew a $70,000 house at the Hemisphere Arena, and he didn't get the payoff. And Jack, you said that you had heard that did take place.
Yeah,
that he didn't get it. I was very fortunate. Yeah. I was very fortunate in my career until I met up with Ole Anderson, and this is what we want to talk about with Ole just for a second. He said once I met up with Ole Anderson, which was when my career went from sugar to shallow. I don't know how that happened, but that's what he said. He said, yeah, he had a piece of the action. They're talking about him, owning part of the territory. And I'm not for sure in 1980, I think Bill Watts still owned. I don't think Ole had any percentage of the territory.
Nope, he did not. Because a part of 1980, Watts actually booked it, part of it 80. He and Jody Hamilton did.
So Ole did not. So that part of it was not correct. Ole did not have points until I think maybe he didn't have points till around 1982. I think Bill Watts was still part owner of that till 1982, or 10%. He owned 10% of the company. He said, yeah, he had a piece of the action, which he didn't. He not only had a piece of the action.
If you count it that Ole was the booker, yeah, he would make a booking percentage.
Yeah, but he said he owned pieces of the company, though.
Okay.
But he was the booker and put himself on top. He also put guys like me and Austin Idom, Kevin Sully, Mark Lewin, and guys like that underneath him on the card. I won't say what he calls them, stack the card. That's why he had guys like me underneath him that would do all the work. Do you remember Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert? There's a lot to take in there. We were there.
That's when I was going. From January 1980 forward.
They wasn't setting the Austin Idol never set the world on fire when he had wrestling matches. Mark Lewin never set it on fire. We were there. Cards and crowds was not great during this point in time. They wasn't horrible. But now this is what he says about Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. And probably the reason Eddie Mansfield does not like Ole Anderson. If Ole even dealt with Eddie Mansfield. Remember, Ole Anderson was the booker, but Ole most of the time did not take care of the first 3 or 4 matches. He had assistant booker for that. It was either Ronnie West, Bob Armstrong, A numerous amount of guys. This is what he said. He said, me and Gilbert were working in town in Georgia, and of course, Ole put himself in the main event, and I was underneath him, which is not true. He would not have been under, he wouldn't have went against Eddie Gilbert and been semi-main event. Just wouldn't have happened. Anyway, I get there, and Ole comes to me, and I don't need anybody telling me how to work. That's what he says. He says, whatever you do, just work the arm. I said, no problem. Now I work the arm. I told Eddie Gilbert, we're going to work the arm, brother. I'm going to work it on the tables, on the chairs, and on the ring post. Probably got fired, didn't he?
Yep, he sure did.
And rightfully so, Jack. He should have been fired.
Absolutely.
He should have been fired that night. Because he wasn't a team player, he was an Eddie Mansfield player. But that wasn't Ole Anderson's fault. That was Eddie Mansfield for not doing what he was asked to do. Yep. If he runs his company now, whatever company he's got, doing television, and someone doesn't do what he tells them to do, what's he going to do? He's going to fire him. I guess now he probably understands that there was a reason why Ole asked him to do that. And he said, and this is when you have conflict, really escalated between you and Ole. Well, what did he think was going to happen? I mean, honestly. This is what he put it to me, and then this is where it gets a little crazy. He put it to me that it was Jim Barnett. He put it to me that it was Jim Barnett and him wanted to book me across the country and get 20% of what I got. All right, Jack. Did they ask Eddie Mansfield? Did they tell him they wanted to give him?
I like Eddie, but I don't believe there's any truth to that.
No, I don't think so either. We were there.
On the other hand, Eddie is not the first one to misremember his own past. So.
All right, he says, this is when Wahoo went to Ole and said, leave this guy alone, he's mine, and he takes him to Texas. And he does take him back to Southwest Championship Wrestling. He got a pretty good push until September of 1981. Wahoo took him to San Antonio, Texas, and did some good business with him during that point. Because I think Wahoo seen something in him. And, now, I want to ask this question, though. He says that Ole kind of keeps him from working after that. But he goes to Southwest Championship Wrestling for a whole year almost, draws money, makes money with Wally McDaniel. He leaves there, comes back to Georgia Championship Wrestling, works a couple of shows in 1982, works for the Culkins for Tri-States, works for Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, comes back and works from March to April of 1982 in Tri-States, comes back to Atlanta, where Ole Anderson and Bob Armstrong would have been booking. And let's be honest, Ole did not take care of any Eddie Mansfield matches during that point in time. Bob Armstrong would have. Yeah. He goes in August 1982, he goes to Canada. In April 1983, he goes to work for Bob Geigel. In May of 1983, he goes back to Southwest Championship Wrestling. And one of his biggest wrestling matches of all time, November 1983, he works for George Goulas's UWA. Is that an Ole Anderson problem, or does it seem like he moves around so much? Is that an Eddie Mansfield problem?
I firmly believe that's all on Eddie. And as far as blackballing, I don't think Ole cared one way or the other whether he ever worked anywhere else again or not. But you got to remember, if this comes up in conversation, somebody can say something like, well, Eddie was with you, Ole. What do you think? He screwed up the finish bad enough that I let him go.
Yeah.
And that's good enough for that promoter. Well, if he ain't going to do what Ole asked out of him, then he ain't going to do what I ask out of him, because I'm a nicer guy than Ole. So he's dug this ditch all by himself. And this is not the first time we have heard anybody claim that they were great. And he was great. He had an unlimited potential to him.
Yes.
But when he came to Georgia if he in any way butted heads with Ole, it was over with. But you also had Tommy Rich, you had Mr. Wrestling 2, you had the Masked Superstar, you had a plethora of top talent that they were coming in at that time. Because I started going the end of January of 1980. Eddie was on one show, and I think that was him and Austin maybe tagging, and saw it that one time. I thought they were a good tag team. I thought he did a lot of work in the ring that Austin couldn't do, or wouldn't do, I should say. But they were very entertaining. They knew their roles, and but then he never came back to Columbus again. So
When he does the 2020 issue, he says that he does it because he's trying to get the wrestlers to be able to join the, I guess this it's the AFTRA or the Screen Actors Guild, so they can get
yeah,
they can get insurance.
yeah.
Okay, I understand that, but why would he have to go in such how could it be said in such a because he goes into real major of what wrestling's about.
Yeah.
How did that help the wrestlers?
If you sit back and think about it, and obviously he didn't, there's no way that would have worked out. Absolutely no way. I mean, at best, it hurt the business a little bit. At worst, it could have basically ended our industry. So, what have you accomplished there? Absolutely nothing. And I'm not saying all that to say that wrestlers don't deserve insurance and retirement, all that kind of stuff. I've always thought I wish there was a way we could do that. But the nature of the business is if you're not drawing money, if you're not doing something to further the business of each show you're at, then you have to leave.
Yeah,
And if you're contracting with people, um, and I know a lot of people get upset at WWE because they'll sign these long term contracts, and then for whatever reason they see they're not doing what they want them to do or not producing the way they want them to go, they'll cut them. But how else are you going to do that? The entertainment industry, movies, TV. Look at your major networks. I mean, they're canceling new series all the time. And some of those actors, I guess a lot of them probably get other jobs doing other things out there and starring in other things, but some of them never work again. Is
yeah.
that fair? Well, that's the way life is. And if you don't know that going in, uh, then you don't understand our business or any business of entertainment. And that applies to singers, comedians, whatever.
I think people, and Rodney will ask this question. I think people have a tendency, and I've noticed this in a lot of interviews, in a lot of things that people talk about. People have a tendency to blame Ole for a lot of things. Ole was a businessman. If you drew money for Ole, I'm gonna be honest with you, he could overlook a lot of stuff. Buzz Sawyer was a true thought process of that. Did he find someone for an escape? And does wrestlers in general find Ole Anderson? Because I hear people talk. Even Dutch Mantell said some things about Ole that was not true. To my knowledge, Dutch Mantell really never worked for Ole Anderson that much. I don't remember maybe twice that Dutch ever worked for Ole, and that would have been in 1990 and maybe sometime in 1976. Now, how he would know as much as he would say he knew about Ole when he only worked for him for maybe 3 months, 4 months at the most. Why is it that people want to act like they know Ole and they really don't? Jim Cornette, for instance, we'll talk
It's
about
easy.
Ole.
He's
And
an
Jim
easy.
Cornette doesn't know anything about Ole Anderson either. He never worked for Ole. Very small, minute time that he worked for Ole. All right, go ahead, Ron. I'm sorry.
What we have is Eddie Mansfield has had a history of blaming others for his failure. He goes to California and he blames Ron Fuller for leaving California when he was on top. Just for 60 days is all he wanted to. He goes and he's mad at Joe Blanchard for screwing him off his payoff of his supposedly $70,000 house in San Antonio. That was Joe Blanchard's fault. Eddie Mansfield is never responsible for his own shortcomings. It's always somebody else. And Eddie getting on this 2020 interview saying that he's trying to help the wrestlers is kind of like Eddie making a suggestion to the Titanic. Hey, run into this iceberg. It will make it go faster. It's always somebody else's fault. And when you cannot take responsibility for anything, notice there is no responsibility taken from him at all. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always Ole's fault or Leo Garibaldi's fault or Wahoo McDaniel's fault or somebody else's fault. Ron Fuller screwed him on his payoff. Okay? It's always somebody else's fault, never my own. Just don't. I wouldn't take anything Eddie Mansfield has to say as the gospel. And if all those things happen to him, if you're on top, you know you're on top in California, and I don't remember him saying that his payoffs were bad in California.
No.
And then you're willing to leave there because Ron Fuller called you up. Ron Fuller doesn't call people up. Ron Fuller does. People call Ron Fuller to come to work, not the opposite way. If Ron's going to call somebody, he's going to call Robert. He's going to call Jimmy Golden. He's going to call Roy Lee Welch. He's going to call Bob Armstrong. He's not going to call Eddie Mansfield.
You know, I feel like that Eddie was a great wrestler. He really was a great wrestler, and he could have been huge in the wrestling business because he could work, and he had the ability. We all make mistakes, and I just don't like people. I think what it comes down to is it really irks me when people talk about Ole and say things about Ole. And we were there from 1974 until 1984, worked around Ole. Dad worked around Ole, and Ole was never the person. Yeah, he wasn't friendly to the people working for him. But what did they want him to do? Did they want him to go out and eat with them? Because he was the boss. When he got ready to fire you, he was going to fire you because it was about making money for Jim Barnett and Georgia Championship Wrestling. It wasn't about you making money. It was about them making money. And those people who talk about him and people start believing it. Dutch Mantel, when he talks about Ole, and he really doesn't know much about Ole because he never really worked with Ole. I don't remember. We were in Atlanta. I think Dutch was there 3 months and sometime. So you're telling me between 1974 until 1990, he worked for him 3 months and then worked for him in Atlanta, but he acts like he knows everything about Ole Anderson. Come on. I'm sorry, but he doesn't. Jim Cornette worked for him for 30 seconds before he fired him, and then he worked for him during the time of Georgia, but he wants to act like he knows who Ole Anderson is. Jim Cornette will talk about things that he heard, not what he actually saw, because he never worked for him. Ole wouldn't have booked him. Ole wouldn't have used him because he said he was a clown. And by the 1990s, let's be honest, Jim Cornette was a clown. I mean, I hate to be that way. I get tired of people talking about Ole that really don't know it. But if you know the people that know him, Mass Superstar, Stan Hansen.
Well,
the people that really know him.
Jerry Oates is on here with us tonight. Jerry has nothing to say, anything bad to say about Ole. He just says, you go in, you do what Ole tells you to, and there's not a problem. That's just the way it works.
That's exactly what Bill Eadie told me when we were talking about him one time. He said, I never had the first moment's problem with Ole. He said, I went in, he told me what he wanted me to do, and I did it. He said, there was never a crossword. He said, we weren't buddies. We didn't hang out. He didn't come to my house. I didn't go to his. He was my boss, and I treated him like my boss. And he said, you'll never hear a bad word about Ole to me because he did right by me, because I did right by him.
And if he tells you a story about Ole, well, you know what? He was on the main event, and I guarantee you, whatever story he tells you is the truth. If Wally McDaniel tells you a story about Ole, whatever he tells you is the truth.
Yeah, Jerry was saying, Jerry's saying right now, Jerry Oates on here. We got to get Jerry back on too.
Yeah.
Jerry, he said that's the absolute truth. That's what he's saying right now.
All right, so let's get back to people because I found it. I find a lot of things that is said about Ole. I find them coming from people that really don't know.
Exactly.
And I've heard Jim Cornette, I've heard Dutch Mantel, and I've had people say stuff. I think they should have said, "Well, I only worked for him for about 3 months, so really, what do I know?" But instead, you want to act like you know something that you really don't, and that I have a major problem with, especially when you're going to knock Ole. And Ole made more money in the wrestling business than Jim Cornette ever thought about making. He made more money than Dutch Mantel ever thought about making. He was in places that you know, and they're not the only people. There are other people that talk about him that never worked for him, and people that did work for him, I think, and actually was there, main events, and really knew Ole. I think they would tell a completely different story. All right, Richard Hood said, "Good evening, guys." Michael Barr, hello all. Don Hester is with us as well. I'm not going to push all these up because all they are is saying hello. Don Hester's with us. Kevin Penley, I forgot to talk about this. Yes, good evening. Thank you guys for all you did in wrestling. Most guys don't get credit, and I am glad that Thunderbolt Patterson is in the Hall of Fame.
Yes, and fans worldwide of today's generation are having a heart attack because they do not know how Thunderbolt Patterson got in, or they don't know who he is entirely.
Especially those fans. Michael Barr, Rodney, we and all as we as oh wait a minute. May just say let me. All right, let me see if I can do this again. Here we go. Take 3. We and all as we the people have spoken. All right, there we go. All right. Jack, you can be honest. Tell me, are you causing all of this?
It's Rodney. It's always Rodney.
I got on a tangent tonight, so I turned into Rodney today.
Well, when you were talking about Ole, I was thinking, I had a guy call me the other day and was asking about, is Rodney as bad as what he's heard? And I said, yeah, but,
That is correct.
What? All right, here's the Daniel Lane asked the guest. And what did Don Carson call his black glove? I know this. I know it. I don't even want to. I know this. It's pancake, biscuit, C, peanut butter, D, flapjack. I know that just right off the. I didn't until somebody told us about it. I think it's Tim Horner.
Tim Horner
told us. Michael Barr is on there. Old Bugsy McGraw. Man, he was good. I've watched tapes from that championship wrestling from Florida. Man, he did it. But they did kind of turn him almost the same way they turned Dusty Rhodes in 1974 when he got turned off.
Well, it worked the first time. Maybe it'll work the second.
I don't think Buzzy got over like Dusty though, did he? I don't think he drew the money Dusty did. I don't. Maybe he did. We'd have to go back and look at.
He makes those reunions down there in Florida all the time. He looks really good.
So did Gordon Soley record Florida and Georgia Championship Wrestling on the same day? I believe they recorded. Didn't they do the taping maybe on a Tuesday or Wednesday night in Florida?
During the day, I believe that's what Daniel was telling me. They did it during the day in Florida at the Sportatorium in Tampa. And then, of course, Georgia Championship Wrestling done on Saturday mornings in Atlanta.
Who was Roland Daniels? I don't know. Who was Roland Daniels? Did we talk about a Roland Daniels, or is he just asking us the question? Who Roland Daniels is?
Sorry, we're not aware of Roland Daniels. Sorry.
I think maybe you were talking about Daniels, whatever his name is.
Oh, yes, Daniel Bryanson. We're waiting with bated breath when they have excellent good wrestling over there. And let us know, Daniel.
Hey,
We'll
I
tune in.
want let me throw this in while I'm thinking about it because y'all know my train of thought, and I'll be off on
Yes.
another tangent here in a second. But AEW popped 1 million viewers for Sasha, whatever she's calling herself now, and could not sustain it for the rest of the show. The overall average was under 700,000, I believe.
Wow. Michael Barr, did the stadiums in Florida Championship Wrestling get as full in the 80s as opposed to the W? I think they did. I think they did. I think they did well until 1984, 85. I
Yeah.
think business suffered at that
It's
point.
pretty much
When you
everybody
have
was sliding.
when you have the electrifying personality of Brian St. John, ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing but money. I'm telling you right now.
He didn't have any personality, did he? He was
That
boring.
man, if you could have made it any worse, we watched a match in Chattanooga. And after that, we're lucky that we had other matches over that, because after that was about the most near nothing match I'd ever seen in my life. And I pushed for him to be fired. He was not, but I pushed for him to be fired after that.
Fans still talk here in Montreal about the air match. That had to be gross, didn't it?
Yeah, they've heard it all over the place.
Richard Hood, guys, was it in 81 that GCW moved from 1018 West Peachtree Street to 1050 Techwood Drive? I believe it was.
I think you're about right. The
Yeah,
end of
I didn't
80,
like the
first
new
of 81, because Mansfield, he worked in the old studio, the one you're talking about, the old one, Peachtree, and then he also worked at Tickwood Drive one. So it was about in that time. The Freebirds actually, I think they were there 1 week, their first week at the old studio, and then the very next time they were at the new place.
Jeremy Richter, hello from Texas, Bam Bam tonight on Dark Side.
Yep.
And Tebow in the Hall of Fame. What a great time to be alive.
I wonder if he's full.
Let's see.
There's been some video of Thunderbolt's interviews on YouTube. I don't know how long it was, how long it's been on there, but they've got the best of Thunderbolt Patterson interviews.
Richard Hood.
Anything you got between two shoes. I love that.
Richard Hood, 2020 was supposed to have interviewed Ole. Ole wouldn't have done that.
No.
He wouldn't have done it. Does Rodney call him by first name, Triple, or Paul?
Triple. And then when I have a problem with him and I have to really get his attention, it's Mr. H.
Vince got the ideal from WrestleMania from Starrcade.
Wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah. Jimmy James said 85. 85 was whatever we were talking about.
That was WrestleMania. That was the first WrestleMania in 85.
Or WrestleMania. All right. Let's see. The interview between Andrew and Bob Uecker was hilarious. As Andre squeezes by, yeah, that was.
That, for whatever reason, is coming up in my YouTube my YouTube recommendations this week. That came up too.
Do you think if Vince is cleared of allegations, would Vince open a new company to try to put the company he built out of business? No, I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure he's got a non-compete anyway. And, I mean, let's look at his age. That's a big factor.
Man, he looks horrible too. So,
and even if he got cleared, who's going to support that? Because he's still going to have that stigma no matter what.
Mario Galante.
Galanto.
Well, I'm telling you what. This is the reason right here on April 6th, I will not be doing commentary. Let's see here.
You'll hear our commentary from backstage where we're yelling.
There will be echoing, yes. There will be echoing.
He said he exposed the business in 1974, and I do remember hearing about that.
Yep.
So Eddie Mansfield he wasn't the first, and how well did Jack's match go?
Well, I didn't die, and I did. I was not expecting much. I will have to say that everybody helped me in there, made me look a whole lot better than what I really felt like I was. But all in all, it's not a bad match. If you want to peruse down through my timeline sometime, it's posted. Let's just say that elbow drop finish was pretty, and it like to have killed me.
Hasso said, "Hi everyone, Richard Hood. Guys, I think it's a slap in the face to the wrestling business when wrestlers and promoters expose the business. I think it really was. It is bad. You showed just disrespect for something you said you loved.
Yes. Yes.
Plan B was horrible. Yes, that was absolutely horrible as well. So, I mean, let's think about it. Bob Orton, Hall of Famer. Ronnie Garvin, was he a Hall of Famer?
I don't think so.
And Bob Roop, they were all going to do the same thing that Eddie Mansfield was going to do. So just locally, not worldwide. So the greatest hair match is still Jake losing to Conan while working for Cornette and Smoky Mountain. I don't think I ever watched that. Was that at the end of Smoky Mountain? So I don't think I ever watched Smoky Mountain, but a few times. Kevin Penley, even though Mike Jackson has been Alabama junior champion for 40 years, Mel Mascaras has been IWA champion for 40 years. Didn't they just do something and he was at a show in Mexico?
Yeah.
And he had to be helped and stuff
Sure
to the...
And Mike is a 50-year champion, just so we can correct that.
Mike Jackson.
I love Mike.
Years.
Oh, Jake lost his match in a triple A.
Yeah.
Triple A. Michael, I thought Jake had already lost his hair by then. I mean, just naturally, about like I have. What I thought. I've been working too long and hard here. May I take 90 days off?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you can afford it.
Sure. You're exactly... That's right. I've been under such a... Well, we know how hard a schedule. Even today's wrestler has a hard schedule. Cody, absolutely exhausted and
he's
daunting of their
tears.
schedule. It's Gunther, he's... have to be away from them, sacrificing, being away from his family and his wife and daughter, and apparently had time to knock the wife up, but not enough time to go work. I mean, what's the problem here? True. I mean, WWE is such a terrible, awful. Just the pace is just too much for them.
Hey, that $3 million a year some of them were making, that's just horrible. That's not enough
awful.
money for me.
It's just a drop in the pan. They're giving us out. It's like working for Ron Fuller, getting those great payoffs, or in this case, Blanchard.
Hasso, yeah, he was Cornette's champ and took a booking in AAA to lose his hair. Michael Barr said no one has ever begged him to stay. He said, if I left, I was replaced.
That is correct.
That's the way it goes in the wrestling business.
It
It ain't like it was the same, like the LaBelle's was the first person.
You couldn't afford to allow talent to do that. You could not, because you let one get away with it, all of them get away with it. And I mean, let's be honest, Austin Idol took many pages out of Eddie Mansfield's book, or maybe vice versa. I don't know. They were partners.
Hey, but he talks about like if there were anybody that Ole would have made sure he got blackballed, it would have been Austin Idol, wouldn't it?
He would have, yes.
But he didn't. Because I'm going to be honest with you, you probably asked Ole Anderson 20 years ago who Eddie Mansfield was, he'd probably say who? He wouldn't even remember who he was.
Exactly.
Kevin Penley, Jack, what happened to Global Wrestling that was in Pell City?
there was some issues between the promoter and the state athletic commission. I won't go into those details because I know what the details are, but it's not my place to put that out there. I will say GCW had an amazing show. I was glad for a time to be a part of that, uh, but I don't know that the commission's ever going to allow him to run again. I kind of wish they would because the quality shows, regardless of any other issues I may have had with him, quality show, and if you're giving the fans what they're buying a ticket for, hey, I think you ought to be in business.
Okay, let's see here. So, how did Ron Fuller end up with Southeastern Championship Wrestling in Alabama, and it went to become Continental Championship Wrestling? Rodney?
Ron Fuller actually, he and Robert actually bought out the Fields brothers in Gulf Coast Championship Wrestling, and the Gulf Coast became Southeastern Championship Wrestling. And at one time, they had a Southern Division and Northern Division. The Northern Division, as we just stated, Ronnie Garvin, Bob Roop, and whoever else tried to basically do a takeover, ran against them, drove the whole business up there in Knoxville, killed it for years. Nobody was able to draw in there.
Still bleeding,
and it's still hit or it was hit or miss. You could put Tommy Rich and Harley Race up there and draw a decent crowd, but basically killed it off better than a doornail. So the Fullers moved to Alabama, Pensacola, pretty much, and started running that. And then later on, when the TV moved from Dothan. For years, Southeastern Championship Wrestling was in Dothan, did it to TVY Studios in Dothan, and then it moved to Birmingham. And when it moved to Birmingham, they changed the name to Continental Championship Wrestling, and then Gordon Soley became the host. And that's that.
Okay, because we didn't write down a lot of things, the stories are 40 years old, and as a result, they are at best one half truths. Yeah, some of them I think they're just making it up.
Yeah.
I think they just make it up. Now, don't get me wrong. Ole made up a couple of things too in his book. But I think Ole's book, though, out of the books I read, Bill Dundee's and Ole Anderson's was the two books that got it closer to anybody else during that time frame. I don't think Ole. The only thing Ole got wrong was when he fired Les Thatcher and Ronnie West and said they were making all that money that they were making. That was, that he did fire him at the same time. He remembered that, but some of these stories for some of these guys, they just trying to make it up just so they can have some kind of content. Richard Hood, Eddie Mansfield had his own promotion down in Florida, Universal Studios.
Yeah. It was funny. It was funny when Eddie was running that show. He would instead of giving the scripts out to the wrestlers, he would hand it out to the fans as they came in, and they could read along with the show. Absolutely tremendous business idea there.
And I bet you, when he gave somebody a finish and they didn't do what he asked, I bet he was mighty upset. But Ole wasn't supposed to be.
Billy and Bart Gunn got their start with him.
Let's see, Michael Barr. What years did your dad, Ron West, work Southeastern Championship Wrestling? He got there sometime in September of 1983. He worked there for 3 months. Went to work for Mid-South Wrestling in 1984. Left in 1985. Stayed there for 6 weeks. Left and went back to Mid-South Wrestling. Stayed there until, I don't know, maybe 5 months. Then came back to Continental Championship Wrestling, and this would have been right before 1986 started, because 1986, 87, 88, except for the little 4 months that he went to Kansas City, most of the time he worked for them. Don't go to Kansas City. That's not a good place, though. Not a good territory. Beautiful place, though. We loved the area, but the wrestling was really, really bad when you still had to use Bulldog Bob Brown on the main event. That was the. Congrats to T-Boat's induction in the Hall of Fame for Mickey Mayfield. Richard Hood, I just remember Eddie Mansfield as an enhancement talent. He did get a push. Now, honestly, he did get a push in California, and he did get a push in Texas, and he did draw money in both those places.
Yep.
That is true. He did do it. I did the research. Yes, that happened, and he was pushed good there. Chavo Guerrero loved him. Wally McDaniel loved him. So he evidently did what he was asked. I don't guess he went out and just did. Who had the Texas territories at the time? Fritz von Erich. The Funks, I believe. Is that when Dick Murdoch and Mulligan bought their territory?
I think
the Funks territory. I know at some point they bought the Funks territory. I don't know what.
Amarillo. Funks opened at Amarillo. We got Paul Bosch in Houston, and then Joe Blanchard in San Antonio.
Mansfield worked for Joe Blanchard in San Antonio. So is Watts, Fuller, and Vince, the original promoters, still alive? I think they might be.
That's about. Well, I would still say that David Crockett, I would regard him as a promoter as well.
One of them just died, right?
Jackie
just died. The nice one of the whole group. I met David a couple of times in Kansas City, and that's all I can say about that.
Same.
Wasn't a nice guy. Neither was Jim Crockett Jr., though. Doug Masters, hello, gentlemen. How you doing, Doug?
Now, let's be honest now. David was a star, Brent.
Watch it.
No, he was actually a wrestler.
Was he really?
Yes, we have a picture of him on here where he wrestled.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Ooh. Mickey Mayfield, Austin Idol was better on the mic than in the ring. He was great on the mic. Now, you have to give it. He could tell a story.
He really was.
Was there any territories, Nevada, Arizona, Montana, and those regions of the U.S.? Yes, there was. I'll look them up and put it on the Facebook page, Michael. But there was territories up there. And a lot of times AWA ran Nevada, though, didn't he? Mm-hmm. Even back in years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was. They go all the way from Minnesota to Nevada.
They probably had some kind of incentive about going.
Kevin Penley, do you like the animated referee who is in the match, or the ref who just counts? Do you like the animated referee who is into the match, or the ref? I like the animated referee that's into the match. What do y'all think?
I agree with that.
Rodney?
I like the referee that can gauge what the crowd is buying and either be animated if he needs to be, and be just the person that counts if he needs to be.
Richard Hood said Eddie Mansfield was a baseball player from Columbus, Georgia. Al Ramirez. Hey, guys. How you doing, Al? Let's see. Hasso. Yeah, memory is funny. Flair has finally remembered after all these years that he wasn't in Puerto Rico the night we lost Bruiser Brody. Yeah, for a long time. Yeah. Oh, man. He might want to just check. You go, there's a thing called newspaper.com. And in that, you can get you a monthly deal for about $29, and you can find wrestling matches from the 1900s. And he could have went back to see where he was on that particular night. It would have helped him out.
Wait a minute. Now, I was born in the 1900s.
Was Paul Ellering a decent wrestler? I only saw his match. I thought he was. I think, especially as the years went by, I thought he was really good. What do y'all think?
Yeah, from what I've seen of him now, but the matches I saw, he was several years into it, so he had really gotten a lot of experience, and I thought he was really good. I really thought he was going to be a pretty decent sized star.
Now, Richard Hood said that Eddie was blackballed from the business, and that's why he exposed the business. And I don't know if he was blackballed. He just worked every territory, and they didn't want him back.
Yeah.
I don't think he was blackballed because I don't think most people, except for California and Texas, I'm not for sure nobody else even knew who he was.
and we've always heard the blackball part, but let's be honest. If there's a promoter or booker out there that thinks they can get an extra ticket sold with you being on the card, they're going to hire you. They don't care the history behind it.
No. Bob Orton Jr. got a job after he tried to steal a territory. Randy Savage got a job in the wrestling business after he tried to steal territory. I mean, look at the people. Bob Roop. I mean, Bill Watts picks them up and uses them. So just soon after all that happened. So, yeah, that's just a black. I just don't.
If you're talented, you can go. I mean, a lot of times you don't even have to be talented. You just got to have a gimmick they like.
Look at Thunderbolt Patterson. Look how many times that he went and worked opposition against people. But he never was blackballed. He just wasn't. Let's see. He was a disgruntled employee. Well, that's how he come over to. George Lambert, Ben Masters said Joe. I'm not for what we were talking about.
Mo.
Jerry Oates. What's up, Jerry Oates? Let's see. Jeremy Richter. Back in my development days, we were going to bring up Mansfield, exposing the business of Les Thatcher to get him riled up. But he loved Eddie and put him over big. I mean, he was a good wrestler. I mean, he really was. I thought his punches looked good. His moves looked, everything he did looked good. So I think he messed up, to be honest with you. But maybe, hey, there could have been some extracurricular activities that made him do that too. Michael Barr, how much, if possible, would it cost a company and entertainment to pay insurance for all its wrestlers and remain in business? It would be very expensive. Wrestlers had insurance. I mean, you think about Ted DiBiase had it. He lived off of it for a long time. What was that called? Lords of London?
Something like that. Lloyd's of London. Yeah.
We need Jerry else back on the show. Yes, we do. We do need him right there. Jerry, you still wrestling Gators? That's what Kevin said. Allison Mitchell. We need y'all to come back to the Cajun Dome. The Cajun Dome. Let's see. Nice. Yep. I'm going to pass some of this stuff up because it's just everybody saying hello. At the Atlanta Fan Fest a few years ago, interviewed Eddie and David Schultz in a Q&A. And Ole was there in a wheelchair and challenged Mansfield, and Eddie backed off, of course. Mickey Mayfield, Ole Anderson told a story about Stu Hart making pancakes and using the same spatula to flip them as he used to clean his cast litter box.
I heard that.
I don't know. We were around Ole for 10 years, and we never seen the side some of these people are saying. Yeah, he was a harsh businessman. Now, we saw him tell people, that ain't how I told you to do the interview. Go back and do it again. Well, Dad was kind of that way too. So he'd tell guys too, you can't say it that way. Go back and do that over again. Yeah. I guess people probably talk bad about Dad too because he wasn't really friendly to him as well. He was probably more friendly than Ole was, but you couldn't be. People run you over if you too friendly with them.
Well, look at us. We knew each other for years before we got to being friends.
Yeah.
Because business comes first.
Yeah. Hasso, Jim has always talked Ole to an extent from what I've listened to. Didn't refer to him like they were ever friends, but him and Ole had mutual respect after Cornette could be snarky right back. I don't know. I don't even know that he said that, though. I don't think he would. I don't think he ever said nothing to Ole. I just don't think he said it. Ole would have slapped the crap out of him.
Ole had a very dark sense of humor, and it was hard to get on that level. Now, that's where we got along at, because I have a very dark sense of humor. But I wasn't working for Ole when we were talking.
This is true. I just don't. I'm sorry. 1983, Jim Cornette and Ole met each other. There was never any Ole was never anywhere where Cordette was except for that little small time in the Crockett's territory, and I doubt very seriously Ole talked to him too much. I mean, I just can't see that he did.
Yeah.
Victor Nash, Rodney, Jack, Brett, what are your thoughts on all the profanity on live TV between The Rock and Cody?
Rodney and I were talking about this before we came on the air. I hate it. I don't think there's ever a need for it in our industry. Uh, but then again, with us trying to do what we're trying to do, uh, maybe maybe we can be that alternative to actual family entertainment that WWE it looks like they're going to more adult entertainment aspect. And AEW, I don't know about those boys.
Stuart Kemp. Rodney, what do you think about that? I don't watch it, so.
It is definitely definitely looks like the direction that WWE is going to take, especially with going to Netflix. I think that we will see a definite turn. I hope not, but I think that what we'll see is more profanity, possible nudity, with them being on Netflix. Um, it's terrible, I think, for definite sure. But it would bring me back to the days of ECW, and you can't get any worse than that. I mean, from women pulling their tops up and all kinds of just downright debauchery on their television. Just would not put it past them, and that's what my fear is. That's where they're going to be going, and to me, does that entice the next generation of wrestling fans? Will that bring families? Because the way we were growing up, it was from grandparent to our parents to kids. Will that be the case once they go this direction? And I hope they don't. But all indications is that looks like where they're heading.
And they may pop a good crowd for, let's say, 20 years. They might get good ratings. But eventually you're going to run out of that age group, and all those young people coming up that were not allowed to watch it because of everything that was going on, they're not going to attach to wrestling.
And here's the thing, and I don't know if on Netflix if they're still going to have sponsors or commercials in their show or not. I'm not sure about how that's going to work. But if in that case, they don't need them, so they're not worried about sponsorship at that point.
Right.
And lots of what they do now keeps them in their lane because you make one of them mad. The next thing you know, all your sponsors, your show's gone. Nobody's buying commercials in your TV, so hopefully that is not where they're headed. Certainly, if that is where they're saying it, and then like I said, it looks like where they're headed, I would rethink that. I really would.
Yeah, we just don't feel like profanity has a place in wrestling.
It has no, it's no creativity whatsoever. If you're using that, you're not creative.
No.
You're simply not creative. And
you want to tell a story inside the ring. Tell that story. Tell that story within inside the ring, and then you got your interviews, so you learn who the wrestler is, learn a little bit about them. But you don't have to cuss. Stuff.
Maybe Thunderbolt can get the whole group together up there and teach them how to lead up to a cuss word and then veer off the other direction.
There's way of saying the same exact thing without using it. Get your point over the same way. But you don't want that to be the point, and I think it cheapens the show. But
hey, talking about that, you remember when they made the big deal to put the soap operas on, Netflix or whatever they were on, Hulu, whatever they were on, and they decided to go completely the cussing route on them. I mean, they would cuss, they'd go half almost nude, and it was just horrible. It didn't last 3 months. So I don't see wrestling. I just don't see people watching that. I don't.
And we have talked about this a million times on here, is how what is called pro wrestling today, which isn't pro wrestling,
no.
How they left millions of people behind because they kept changing the product, and people were not going to tune in for the direction they were going. The Monday Night Wars drew big numbers,
Yep.
but there's nowhere near that many people. There's like 10, 15% of that, those folks or those numbers still tuning in.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Stuart Kim said, "We're always going to have opinions, and people, good, better, different." I have no problem. We have our opinions, and everything we say is an opinion. It's not, it's our opinions and our opinions only. If you're going to have an opinion about something, make sure that you can go back and show some history of working with this person and talking with this person and give your history based on that, not what someone else said.
Right.
That's the secondhand stuff, and they're talking like they know, and I just don't think so. Now,
If one
this man
person,
Jerry Oates would know. He worked with Ole.
if one person says Vince McMahon was a jerk, yeah, I wouldn't believe that. But you got a million people saying he's a jerk. I tend to believe those million people.
And he was the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Thunderbolt knew Ole. Yes, Thunderbolt did know Ole. Knew him well, and to my knowledge, I think Thunderbolt talked to Ole almost every day.
Yeah.
That's
where I have always used that as an example when people have said, "Well, Ole was racist."
Yeah, he loved Thunderbolt, and Thunderbolt loved him. So, also, let's face it, Cornette is the one person who doesn't mind going over the top with. I don't. Some of the things he says, now he's crazy. He's done some crazy stuff. Ain't no doubt. Let's see, Donnie Hester. Well, I guess we won't have Dutch or Cornette on the show. I wouldn't want either one of them on the show. I like Dutch, but I think he uses things for his show to get people to listen to him. And I love him to death, but he's talking about things that I think it's just secondhanded talk. And Cornette, he has said things so much that people believe what Cornette's saying is the truth. And honestly, it's just not. He says a lot of things. He said one time he got his hair cut because Bill Dundee got mad at him. And that's the reason they cut him. No, they did it because they needed something within the match so they could say they're going to take off the mask. It was an angle. Be honest, if Bill Dundee got mad at him, he'd just fire him. If he did something, he would have fired him. He wouldn't have cared. He wouldn't have cared. They could have put anyone in that spot, and it was Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey. That was the team. They were the one drawing the money. Cornette was just there to get the heat. He was just there for the heat magnet. But they could have brought in other people. Eddie Gilbert could have been brought in and put in that position, and Eddie Gilbert could have done just as good as Jim Cornette. Yeah. Cornette's career was very short when you look at it. By 1990, really, who knew who Jim Cornette was? But he talks about like his career. He just made millions and millions and millions of dollars for the wrestling business, and he really didn't. I mean, he was successful in 1984. He was successful 85, 86, but we're talking 4 years. By 1987, he was irrelevant. And nobody cared nothing about him in 88. Nobody cared about in 89, 90, 91, 92. Just tell me anything he did past 1988 that you remember. He just didn't do anything. I mean, for a long period of time, he was good at telling wrestlers what to do. I'll give him that. He knew wrestling, and he does know wrestling. But I think he makes up some things sometimes that he knows that he really don't know. He's just telling a story that he heard Dutch Mantel tell, or that Dutch really knows. I mean, if he tells you a story about Jerry Jarrett, he probably knows what he's talking about. I just know he didn't work for Ole enough. I mean, this is my thought process on this. Dutch Mantel's a story about Ole Anderson being mad at Dusty Rhodes. in 1984 because Dusty took the book from him. That's not true. Ole Anderson lost Georgia Championship Wrestling, went to Championship Wrestling from Georgia. Championship Wrestling with Georgia was going to be phased out on TBS because Jim Crockett bought the TBS time slot. Dusty did not. Dusty did not take the book. Dusty was the booker of Jim Crockett Promotions. But when Dutch tells the story, well, Ole was just mad at that. No, he wasn't even going to be the booker. He had to close his company down because he lost TBS, so he didn't have Atlanta to run anymore. Because they weren't going to pay $1 million for it and let Ole stay on there. And Ole wouldn't have done that. So that story was not true. But he told the story like it was true, and people will start believing that his story was true when that is not a true story. And it made Ole look like he cared about whether or not he was booking or not. And people will start believing that because Dutch Mantell said it. And there's so many people that listen to him. And that's what gets me upset because it just makes no sense to me why you're going to say something. Think about it first. Think about the story first. And, I think Dutch might have been in 1984, he might have been in Mid-South or working for, he might have been working for Jarrett at that time. I can't remember, but he certainly didn't know nothing about Ole Anderson and what was going on in the Jim Crockett Promotions. I just tell you that. Corden is funny at times, but is a loon, insane from Jimmy James. I don't listen to him because he cannot speak without cussing.
And look, I cuss, but he's like a marathon runner, and I just trot.
Richard Hood, Ole was making $250,000 in the 70s. Yes, he was. Just a quick for your information, tonight's Dark Side of the Ring spotlights Terry Gordy. I'm just afraid, though, I might not like that. We got to remember we love Terry Gordy. So I think CM Punk should be the referee, I guess, for the match coming up.
Yeah, he's not going to be able. He's still in the sling.
Victor Nash, instead of WWE inducting Bray Wyatt into the 2024 Hall of Fame, they choose to do a special on Bray on Peacock.
Now, they haven't said that he's not going in yet.
Oh, Richard Hood said Roland Daniels was Leroy Brown's real name.
Okay, well, we wouldn't have known that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wouldn't have knew that.
We did honestly, Richard. We didn't get a chance to talk with Leroy Brown in the car. Leroy would ride with us, and by the time we got out of the parking lot to go, get on the road, he'd be asleep, and he would wake up about the time we'd pull into the next arena. We get there. We never did say. We said hello. How are you? And that's about it. And by the time he was,
and this, it's a new
nice
phenomenon.
guy, but we never talked to him.
It's kind of a new phenomenon in the business now, where all these younger guys they're keeping up with real names and work names. Back in the day, we all went by our work names.
Yeah. It's funny. Frank Dusek told a story, and I believe it was the Erdwins that told a story that Leroy Brown would fall asleep before they'd even pull out, and they would have to wake him up to close the door. That's how bad Leroy Brown was bad. So I did add something to Frank Dusek's timeline. So yeah, we had that experience with Leroy Brown as well. So
it was the truth. I think he rode to Carrollton. I think it was Carrollton or Griffin. Hey, Dad looked over at him and he was gone. We just talked. We carried on a whole conversation. Didn't wake him up as soon as we pulled in. Are we here? And that was it.
Then he went to sleep when he got back in the car and didn't wake up till he got to where we dropped him off.
We had heard about this before. We didn't believe it. We didn't believe it. We was always always looking for some good stories. We didn't get any. Yeah, he's full.
Yeah, we know he's full. Hey, Dick Murdoch was the guy that had the stories. He was so good to us. He was very nice to us, and we drove with him a lot of times. And we always liked his stories. I wonder how long they're giving Bolt to talk, and if they'll have 30-second delay.
All he will want to talk about is, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity.
I didn't see where Matt Hardy might be going back to WWE. Victor Nash talks about that.
He and his wife were at Raw this week.
Let's see. Did Slater confront someone at ringside? I'm not for sure.
Well, if he was booking and they're messed up, I would say, yeah, I probably did. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the story you're talking about, Dondre, but I would, if he was booking, I wouldn't be surprised.
Jimmy, I agree with you. I agree with you to a certain extent that by telling people what wrestling was, it did take a little bit of the thrill out. But think about it. One of the biggest times in wrestling was in 1998, 1996, during the Attitude Era. Millions, at some point, 15 million to 20 million people watch wrestling.
Yep.
There was a lot of people watching wrestling then because of it was about telling a story, and they did a great job on telling the Vince McMahon and Steve Austin story, and it was just tremendous the way they told it. And then they turned Steve Austin, and that was the end of it.
Well, I think the majority of fans always knew what wrestling really was.
Yeah.
My problem, and it's been this way since Dave Meltzer first started putting out that dang newsletter, is exposing what goes on behind the scenes and giving away what's coming up. You want to kill a TV series, you want to kill a movie, go out there and start talking about how it ends. That's going to drop attendance, or most people would be like me, where they just wait for it to hit streaming and then they'll watch it. I don't care if I got to wait 4 or 5 months.
Ole told me several times I was too nice to be in the business. Let's see. We're running out of time, so I'm going to have to go through. Let's see. In a real match, who would win, Slater or Wahoo? I'm giving it to Wahoo. Slater, if he punched him, if he got the punch in on Wahoo, that'd probably be the end of him. But if Wahoo could stop the punch, it would be interesting. It would have been an interesting fight.
I wouldn't want to be trying to get in between them. I can just tell you that.
Hasso said I was a regular on Wrestling Classics in the early 2000s, and one of the historians actually found the bill for that PR Puerto Rico card. Let's see. Marcia said T-Boat was the only one of the boys who stayed in touch with Ole after Charlie Smith died. T-Boat told me when Ole died, he lost his brother. And that tells you right there about Ole. Yeah. Spike Hubert was blackballed. Spike Hubert was blackballed by a bruiser after he divorced his daughter, and other than a cup of coffee in Texas that Brody got him. He didn't work despite how talented he was. But he had no real – he was another one of those Brian St. John's.
Yeah.
No. Does profanity – Michael Barr, does the profanity in any way – draw the fans?
Well, yeah, it does for a certain generation of people. I mean, we remember, how we used to sit in the parking lots and listen to Richard Pryor 8 tracks, you know. So yeah, I mean, there's a certain age limit in there where yeah, it would draw. You know, you're grown, you're an adult, you want to talk the way you feel an adult should, and you're going to go and enjoy that. But the margin of people who are wrestling fans is so small now that I think you're cutting it down even farther for those families.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rodney.
Profanity in its place works. If everybody starts doing it, and they will, if everybody's doing it in every segment, it means nothing. If you limit it to when only Steve Austin is doing it, it makes sense. But when it goes from Steve Austin and then every bit of the talent is doing the same exact thing, it doesn't have the same effect. So, and what I'm talking about is that is it possible once they get to Netflix, that's what it's going to be? It's very possible, very possible. And I wouldn't. I just with the group that's running it now, I'm in the way the UFC wrestlers talk in their interviews promoting the show. I'm that's the direction I believe they're headed. And I mean, if you want to talk about, look at those press conferences for UFC. Those are, it's not something you want your children to watch for sure.
No.
Hasso said, I said that months ago about Dutch. I like Dutch. Don't get me wrong, people. I love Dutch, but just stay what you know. Talk about what you know and where you worked. And if you can't remember where you worked and what you did, maybe don't talk about wrestling. Maybe talk about something that you've been. I don't know. Talk about your book that you wrote, because you're making yourself look horrible if you're just sitting there telling a story you don't know nothing about. Very rarely you hearing us tell a story unless we were actually there. So great booker. Richard Dutch Mantel was a tremendous booker. He understood the wrestling business. He understood what he was doing in Puerto Rico. He was a tremendous wrestler. He drew money in the wrestling business. I have all the respect in the world. Just don't have too much respect when you talk about people that he didn't know. And I'm sorry, he did not know Ole Anderson, no matter how much he wants to say. And if you want to, anybody talks about Ole Anderson in 1990, anybody wants to sit there and talk about Ole Anderson in 1990, Ole Anderson could care less if he was even there in 1990. He was there because they asked him to be there, not because he wanted to be there. When he quit, he told Dad, he said, I'm not taking this no more. He said, I'm done.
Yeah.
They'll say they fired Ole. No, Ole just said, I'm done. I'm tired of this. But they'll say they fired him, which I think the second time they did, when Ole was, he did an interview with Brian outside the thing. I think they did fire him for that. But I enjoy Cornette managing the Fabs in Memphis after WCW fired him and Stan. Well, now he'll say they quit, and I think they did quit. But I don't know if that was a smart move on Cornette's part. I really don't. Dutch was booking Florida in '84. I think he was booking Florida in '84 when right before what's his name committed suicide, wasn't he?
Eddie Graham.
Eddie Graham.
I think we need to get Bob Cook on here sometime. Which Bob, by the way, has moved to Bon Aqua, Tennessee.
Where is that at?
Other side of Nashville, I believe. Fred Ottman has opened a restaurant there called Bubba's Filling Station, and he has moved up here to stay with them, with Bubba and his wife.
We will stop it at this because we are running out of time. What's your thoughts on Kevin Sullivan's booker? I thought Kevin Sullivan knew what he was doing when it came to booking. I just didn't think from a certain time on he should have been wrestling.
Now, it was never comfortable when he come to give you your finish, and the only thing he was wearing was boots. Other than that.
Teddy Long, I don't even know. I don't know. That was probably Ole did treat some people bad. Now we watched Ole do that. Now we did Ole treat some people bad, but Jerry Jarrett did. Jerry Jarrett treated people horrible too. We didn't witness it. Bill Dundee said that personally to us that he did some things he shouldn't have done. Jerry Jarrett treated some people badly, and I'm pretty sure people got some bad checks. Nick Goulas, all promoters, all owners, all companies. They could probably tell you a story bad about somebody. I think even Paul Bost or somebody could probably say something bad about him. He was probably one of the best payoff guys in the business. So I don't know. All right, last thoughts, Rodney, and then we got to get off here.
Very exciting that the Rhodes family legacy will be growing again as the nephews of Dustin, Wyatt, and Wayne Rhodes will be making their debut on March the 21st in the RWA Showcase, which I understand is a channel on YouTube.
It's Dustin's channel. That's his promotion that he does in conjunction with his training school. They do a live feed for their at the end of every class cycle. They do a live feed show.
Well,
sometimes
I must say,
good, sometimes not so much.
From the pictures that I saw of Wyatt and Wayne Rhodes, they would be perfect matches for Nick Wayne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolute perfect size. I saw the pictures, and I'm thinking, apparently wherever they're from, no gyms.
He needs to take them to a buffet every
See,
day.
being that we all know that Dusty was a very large person. Oh, by the way, the answer Daniel had for the what Don Carson calls, and of course he told it earlier. It was peanut butter, and
yes,
so that was exactly right. We thank you, Daniel. That's great for that. All that trivia.
I was going to guess that, but it was a total guess.
All right, Jack, your final comments, and we'll get off here.
Hey, let's give out a big happy birthday to Scott Casey, who's still having some health issues, but his birthday was today. But thanks to everybody. We got a lot of stuff coming up. You guys need to make you a trip, plan you an adventure, and come see what we got.
April 6th, Hanceville, Alabama. We'd like to see you there. All right, folks, we'll see you next week.
I'm not right.
Michael
Barr. What does he mean by that?
What do you say?
He said, Rodney, you ain't right, bro. I mean, wow.
Hey, he's right.
What else can we say?
He's correct.
What does he mean by that?
Well, we'll talk about that next week.
Anybody who watched her program and missed NXT tonight, all I have to say is you're welcome.
We'll see you next week, right